He'd go into my room, stand in the closet, and later I'd come in and start studying at my desk, and he could be there for maybe half an hour and then push open the closet door. These are the chilling words of Russell Williams' former roommate. Russell's fellow students at the University of Toronto remember him as obsessive, always keeping his own room spotless and folding his laundry with eerie precision. Picking locks, hiding in the dark, and precision were key components in the crimes that Russell would go on to commit. In his profession, he commanded Canada's largest military airbase. In his spare time, he broke into people's houses on more than 80 counts. At the University of Toronto, he was thought of as shy, but also as a prankster. His crimes, however, point to a much more complex and frightening pathology. By analyzing Russell's word choices in the interrogation, we're able to get an insight into his mind.
As you can see here, everything in this room is videotaped and audio taped.
Check.
You ever been interviewed by the police in a room like this before?
I have never been interviewed like this.
Oh no? Okay.
Russell starts out with a playful attitude. His mood's about to change drastically as the detective's questions become increasingly personal. We should pay attention to Russell's accommodating behavior, being friendly with the detective, Jim. This is a pattern in Russell's behavior. Friendliness or politeness in a stressful situation where the subject's under suspicion is always noted by the detective, not as a proof of guilt, but as a red flag. Frequently, politeness is an indicator of guilty knowledge, when the subject thinks he can win the detective's favor by acting this way.
I'm a big coffee guy. I don't know if you're a coffee guy or not, but I didn't want to drink in front of you, so...
No, I appreciate that.
All right, go ahead.
I could definitely... Are they black?
Yeah, they're just black with sugar.
Definitely. I just started my phone. I probably haven't a little bit.
Started your what, sorry?
Gum. Just
oh, okay.
First piece of gum.
Well, there's napkins there if you want to toss it or whatever.
I appreciate that.
Jessica Lloyd is one of 4 cases that we're currently investigating. Okay,
Right.
There have been 4 occurrences, that, like I said, that we're looking into. 2 of those occurrences occurred in September of 2009,
Yeah.
And very briefly, they were up in the Tweed area.
Yeah.
They involved somebody entering 2 different women's houses in the evening hours. A young lady by the name of Marie-France Como.
My people.
Yeah. Clearly, when we find out who's responsible for one or all of those crimes,
Yeah.
they could be charged with one or all of those offenses. There's a connection between you and all 4 of those cases. Would you agree?
Russell maintains eye contact up until the point where Jim mentions the connection between Russell and the cases. Russell's looking for which words to say next, and although he's hesitant, he ends up agreeing with Jim about the connection.
Geographically,
and then I guess I drive past. Yes, I would have to say there's a connection. Yeah.
The day that Marie-France Como.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you found out?
Jim asked a short question, but rather than giving a short answer, Russell gives a prolonged answer. He repeats some of the same information, adds new information to the question, makes significant pauses, and uses interjections as hesitation markers. Overall, he complicates an uncomplicated question. Unwillingly, he shows that the question's problematic for him, even though it shouldn't be.
I do. Yeah, I was sent an email. Well, as soon as the ops staff and the base learned, they told me.
Okay.
So I got an email. I can't remember if it was late at night or early in the morning. It was certainly, I saw it, I want to say first thing in the morning, because I had just come back from Ottawa. I was in Ottawa for a set of meetings on one of the days. I can't remember what day of the week we're talking about, but yeah, no, I mean, obviously when your people gets killed, it gets your attention. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is Russell fighting with himself, and cleverly, Jim keeps quiet and lets it happen.
I'm very much sure about that coming in.
And how did you know Marie-France Como?
I'd only met her once. She was on a crew I was on just after I got to the base.
Okay.
So I can't even remember. I think it was a one-day trip. I did a number of trips in Canada, transporting our troops, sort of first leg out of Edmonton. We tend to hopscotch them across until they get into theatre. So anyway, I can't remember which trip it was, but we did a number of them out to Edmonton just to pick up the troops, bring them to Trenton, and then put a fresh crew on, and because we'd fly out and back in the same day, so pushing the edge of that, and fresh crew on, and then continue on after a couple hour delay.
Okay. Do you know roughly when that happened?
That we were on the same crew?
The time you met, or the one time there, yeah?
It was soon after I got to the base, so I don't remember exactly, but I would say in the first couple of months, so August, September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim asked how Russell knew Marie-France, but Russell makes a verb switch. Instead of know, he says met, and thus answers a slightly different question. Starting with,
I'd only met her once.
It's a self-protective strategy, indicating that apparently Russell's very much self-aware of how he answers this particular question. Furthermore, it's worth noting that he details the trip. He doesn't give details about Marie-France. Talking about the trip buys him more time to think, and is obviously more comfortable for him. In interrogations, guilty subjects will often elaborate on so-called safe points, points that are more or less irrelevant, but that help them calm down. We also start noticing a pattern. Russell's good at remembering details about irrelevant things, but he's seemingly bad at remembering dates with relevance to what he's being questioned about. As a detective, you shouldn't treat this as a coincidence. In the following, Russell makes substantial pauses, showing that he's suspiciously careful about how he deals with questions with an incriminating potential. He also uses hedging language. Hedges give leeway to subjects if later on they wish to modify or change the statements. Hedges express equivocation. Equivocation should always be noted by the detective.
What we learned after the fact was that the MPs had learnt of her death, I think quite a bit after her body had been discovered.
Okay.
Russell makes a noteworthy pronoun switch from I to we.
What we learned after the fact was that
This way, he depersonalizes the information, appealing to a collective we instead. This is distancing language. The hesitation and hitching continue.
Okay. So I think, if I remember correctly, the MPs learned late that evening. Can't remember when, obviously, her body was discovered. It was probably in the news reports. But so they learned, and then they passed it to ops. So they immediately passed it to me.
Okay.
The MPs work for the wing operations officer, so they go, through their chain of command, and then as soon as the duty to watch officer had that information, she advised me.
Okay.
In semantic terms, he makes the MPs the agents, while he makes himself the recipient. The MPs actively give this information to the implied passive, Russell. He keeps dragging out his answers.
Well, for instance, when you got the email,
Yeah.
do you remember where you were?
I was at home in Tweed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember if that was a week that you were reasonably stable in Trenton, or had you flown?
No,
over?
I had been in Ottawa. I had been in Ottawa earlier in the week. Again, I can't remember how the days all fell together, but I seem to remember that I got this word shortly after having come back from Ottawa. It seems to me it was the same week.
The next passage, revealing. Notice Russell's serious attempt at humor.
So if we were to do a similar investigation in your background, is there anything you can think of that anybody may have misinterpreted, or anything in your history that somebody might say Russell Williams
Absolutely.
did this?
No.
Okay.
Be very boring.
What's that?
It'll be very boring.
All right, because essentially that's what I'm looking at. Is it?
Russell indicates that his life's boring. Self-critique in a situation like this is noted. Doesn't matter if it's said jokingly. It's almost exclusively used for self-protective and thus self-serving reasons. What's more interesting though is the lack of alignment between the detective's laugh and Russell's facial expression. In a conversation between two speakers or more, a high level of mirroring is expected. If one person laughs, the other person laughs, or at least smiles.
Right,
Russell doesn't. He's no longer smiling as he was in the beginning.
You ever been interviewed by the police in a room like this before?
I have never been interviewed like this.
Oh no? Okay.
Something's changed in the conversation. Again, this isn't the detective's doing. He's merely asking questions. By not reacting accordingly, Russell points to this perceived change himself.
Can I assume you're going to be discreet?
It's possible. Yeah.
Because, this would have a very significant impact on the base if they thought you thought I did this.
We note the last words, "I did this." He's relating himself to the crimes, and he doesn't deny the detective's suspicions. This isn't the language of an innocent person.
A couple of doors down was
The,
Lori. I don't know her last name. I don't know.
Mazzacati?
Notice how Russell answers the next question.
A couple of doors down. Ever been in her house?
No. We met her once, I think the first summer we were there, so in 04.
Okay.
There's a 4-second pause preceding his negation. Being inside someone's house is something most people have a clear recollection of. Therefore, they are expected to answer immediately. He then again switches to the collective pronoun we. This time it has an associating function, referring to Russell and his wife. This way, Russell's not alone, linguistically speaking.
Are you familiar with how DNA works? And that's what I'm getting at. If you were ever in Laurie's residence, quite possibly, quite innocently, your DNA could be in that residence. Has there ever been a time you've been in there?
No.
Okay.
It's interesting to note the change in Russell's verbal behavior. Previously, we observed a 4-second pause before he said no. Now that the pressure intensifies, he's making assertive negations about not having been in Laurie's house.
If you were ever in Laurie's residence, quite possibly, quite innocently, your DNA could be in that residence. Has there ever been a time you've been in there?
No.
Okay. What about the other lady down the road on?
I hadn't even heard that name, so no, I don't actually know who that was.
Okay. Have you ever visited Marie-France Como at her residence?
No.
Okay. All right. So you're quite positive there would be no reason why your DNA would be in any of those 3 locations. Okay.
As a dependent word, the adverb actually is used to compare 2 opposing thoughts. Here it can mean that Russell contrasts his claim to the detective's questions, or, as is more often the case when dealing with a guilty subject, that he compares not knowing her to in fact knowing her. Either way, the adverb's noted. Also, we again note the speed with which Russell's now able to deny having been in any of the victim's houses. This is an observable change directly related to the pressure intensity of Jim's questions.
Did you know Jessica Lloyd even in passing for any reason?
No, I didn't hear her name till it was on the news.
Russell lies about not knowing Jessica. We hear a smacking sound before a micropause before he says no. The smacking sound suggests that his mouth is dry, which in many situations point to lying. The micropause gives him additional time to think. The shortened foreshadows further explanation, and we get this explanation in form of an overemphasis, that he didn't hear her name until it was on the news. But before he completes this sentence, he makes a self-repair.
No, I didn't hear her name till it was on the news.
The meanings of self-repairs depend on the context. Here, we observe it in a denial after we've made the observation about the change in Russell's body language. So, the self-repair is very likely associated with his internal stress. Next, Jim talks about Russell, but he disguises it as if he's speaking generally. He even mentions the word nervous, which is what he's probably observed about Russell's behavior at this point. Between the lines, Jim lets Russell know that it's time to start telling the truth, presupposing that he hasn't told the truth.
But what can happen sometimes is somebody gets stopped by the police like you did, and they get asked that question, and people, when they're stopped by the police, they can be nervous, okay? So they blurt out an answer, and then they start driving away, and they go, oh, why did I do that? Because the problem is that once they get asked again, then they feel compelled to maintain that answer for fear that if they change their answer, somebody could find it. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay. If there's any communication or contact between you and Jessica Lloyd, you've seen her picture, right, around town?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Ever seen her before?
I don't. No, I would say I have not.
Okay. All right.
Russell's modification's interesting. He was asked if he'd ever seen her before, and he answers,
I don't. No, I would say I have not.
Okay.
he doesn't simply say, no I haven't. He says, would say, which is a weak denial, opening for the possibility that he has in fact seen her before. Once again, this is equivocation. He says have not without contraction. It's understood that absence of contraction in a denial further weakens it, as it's overly convincing. Next, when Russell's asked about the tires on his Pathfinder, his body language indicates that he's getting more and more uncomfortable.
What kind of tires do you have on your Pathfinder?
I think they're Toyo.
Okay. Do you know the brand name, or sorry, the
I think
make?
that is I don't know. Sorry, the make is Toyo.
Yeah.
I don't know the model.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember where in Ottawa you were?
Yeah, I was in Gatineau with, as I said, meeting about the C-17.
Okay. Now, again, I want to be fair to you here. We're going back 2 months.
Yeah.
Are you sure that would have been the day you were in Ottawa?
Well, only because I wasn't at the base.
Okay.
So I can't remember, honestly, that's the day I had the meeting in Ottawa, but if I wasn't at the base, it was because I was here.
Okay. Now, if that is the day you had a meeting in Ottawa, do you remember being at the base on the Monday, the 23rd, and swiping your card in and out? Do you remember what you would have done that evening to get to Ottawa for that meeting? Like, would it be...
I drove to Ottawa in the morning of the day of my meeting, so if it was the Tuesday, then I would have left Tweed. It was a very foggy morning that morning.
Has there been a time in the recent 1 or 2 weeks that your vehicle has left that road for any reason whatsoever? Have you driven into a field with your vehicle at all for any reason you can think of?
No.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that when the CSI officers were looking around her property, that they identified a set of tire tracks? Shortly after this investigation started, they identified those tires as the same tires on your Pathfinder.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
This is incriminating information, and Russell's initial reactions not to deny this, but to simply say,
Really?
Yeah.
an innocent person is expected to have a strong emotional reaction to this, typically in form of anger.
Your Pathfinder's wheelbase width is very, very close to the width of the tires that were left in that field.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have any recollection at all of being off that road?
I was not off the road, no.
Okay. All right. Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. The investigators are now applying for a warrant to search your office. What are we going to do?
It's hard to believe this is happening. My only two immediate concerns from a perception perspective are what my wife must be going through right now.
Yeah.
and the impact this is going to have on the Canadian Forces.
I'm struggling with how upset my wife is right now.
The question remains, why did Russell Williams, an accomplished colonel, commit these crimes? And even more relevant when considering the glaring difference between his masculine profession and the hidden aspects of his personal life. Why did he commit them in this way? We know of at least one damaging experience that Russell had in an early age, parental divorce. Even though divorce can't begin to explain his crimes, this particular type of divorce might have been particularly traumatic. His parents swapped partners with their close friends, the Sofkas, and for a long time Russell had his last name changed to Sofka. Adjusting to a stepfather, previously known as a friend of the family, might have caused Russell to be resentful of his mother. We also know that he had to relocate many times during his formative years, which may have contributed to a sense of isolation. Other than that, little is known about Russell's upbringing. We know that he showed no affection for his victims, but was very sad when one of his cats died. We know about the immense difference between his macho profession and the crime details. We know he was a shy and somewhat lonely student, but also a prankster who felt entitled enough to invade other students' private sphere. In almost every aspect, Russell's a walking contradiction, and psychologists have had a hard time labeling him definitively. It's clear that Russell sought comfort in fantasy. Fantasy is an outlet for tendencies that a person can express in real life for legal and/or reputational reasons. For the vast majority of people, fantasies are a harmless and sometimes necessary coping mechanism. For a minority like Russell, they escalate to the point where they can no longer be contained in the mind, but are expressed via exaggerated covert means with huge consequences for society and other people. This isn't an automatic process, of course. It depends on the individual's neurological and psychological predispositions, and also the individual's own choices. The concept of choice, and hence accountability, is often overlooked. Seeking help is the choice Russell should have made. Instead, he chose to keep feeding his increasingly depraved fantasies. As a result, hundreds of lives have been affected negatively by his decisions. The lives of his victims, the victims' relatives, his wives, and almost paradoxically, his own life. If a person can feel empathy for other people, it makes no sense to ask him to consider the feelings of other people. Instead, he should selfishly consider his own life and ask himself, are my impulses worth losing my life for? And if the person's looking for fame, is the fame worth it when I can't even enjoy it in prison? In a backwards kind of way, the victims always defeat the perpetrator. The perpetrator is the one who's incarcerated, isolated from the rest of the world for the rest of his life. The perpetrator always loses in the end.